My hair's fucking wild. Ignore that. I got this comment from Meredith's video, and she just did a really good job explaining sort of like right-wing politics in America and how it influenced like Germany back in the 30s and how those elements have always existed here in America and how it's sort of been a slow march to where we are now, and that it's kind of understandable that a lot of Republicans who voted right are feeling a little bit what the fuck after the last week or so. And it's really easy for those of us on the left to get really frustrated and really mad and be like, well, you voted for this. And if you'll remember, like right after the election, the video I made where I said the most frustrating part about this is that when everybody starts to realize what they've done, we're going to have to be a soft place to land. And that's going to be the hardest part because we're so frustrated. But let me explain to you a little bit on top of what she said, how and why this happened, but from the perspective of a teacher. Because if you'll recall, a couple weeks ago, I also had like a mini meltdown when I made like an off-the-cuff joke about something, and the kids looked at me like, I didn't know Britain was bombed in World War II. And I lost my shit, and I threw away an economics lesson, and I walked them through 100 years of history, and watched a lot of them have this exact reaction that we saw in this comment. Like, I voted for this, and now what the fuck did I do? And be aware that I'm not the same with the kids as I am with people here, because like they're young and they're learning. Like, we don't want to be held to the beliefs we held at 17, do we? No, so we're very forgiving of the 17-year-olds with their beliefs. But it's also kind of not their fault, because you can't be frustrated or condemn somebody for not seeing something coming they didn't know to look for. If we're operating in a world where a good chunk of the population is unaware of the events of World War II and how they played out, or only has a very watered down propagandized version of America coming in as the heroes and saving the world, they're not going to be able to see the warning signs as glaringly as those of us that have studied it or whatever, right? So it's kind of not fair to hold them to the standard that you have for yourself, because they're not working with the same tools. Oddly enough, this is sort of I don't want to say the letters because Donnie will get mad, but it's an idea of like creating an equity and an understanding when people don't have the same resources available. So offering compassion and understanding to bridge the gap between understandings. I know we're mad and stuff, but that's what's going to have to be done. Because if you approach it with anger and like condemnation, they're going to put their back up and it's just going to further the divisions. But if you kind of hold their hand while you say this, if you will, and kind of explain like, yeah, no, I know you didn't know, but they didn't know either. And that's how it worked. And these are the tools we're using because they're the tools they used. And no, the German people weren't awful and terrible. They were equally victimized by the Third Reich, right? Like, it was a small group of people in the country that ended up seizing and centralizing power and thus oppressing everybody, right? When I taught European history, we used to have this whole debate, like, were the German people complicit in the rise of Hitler, or were they victims thereof? And there are arguments to be made on either side, but having witnessed it in this country now, I'm falling on the side of victims thereof. Because even in democratic systems wherein you can get people to support really bad ideas, they're not always cognizant of what they're supporting, because a lot of times they're getting conned by greasy con men selling snake oil, as evidenced, here in reality. So yes, I understand the frustration, but you also have to kind of give some space for people who didn't fucking know any different, who've been in their church being propagandized to, who've spent their whole life being told Democrats are the Antichrist, right? If you want them to come out of the fog, you can't act in such a way that validates what they've been told about how you will act. Yeah, it's gonna suck. Yeah, it's gonna be frustrating, but it's gonna have to be the move. And watch Meredith's video and she'll explain even more.